It's time. I want to call the December 19th, 2019 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. We're going to start out with citizens forum, and I want to say something first. I want to remind everybody to please go by the Founders Park on Campbell Station and see the lighting there. We really proud of that every year. Bud McKelvey and his crew do a fantastic job, and we really appreciate what they do. One of the things I always say that I love about it, I see people my age and even older there. I see families with young kids, and I see just groups of teenagers walking around, looking at the lights, making pictures, and enjoying it. And that's a rare thing that can get all that group of people out for something. So if you haven't seen it yet, be sure and go by and enjoy that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I do. This is for public record. The sidewalk at the wall will be closed for the next 3 months or so while they dig out to the footer and block, and then they'll be bricking and stoning. So that will be closed for at least 3 months.
Anybody else?
That's it.
Move on to the approval of the agenda. Mark, you have.
Yeah, we have agenda item number 7 has been requested for postponement by the applicant due to lack of field item completion at this point.
Move to approve with the amended agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes.
Motion approved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a gas system improvement project for KUB in the Concord Hills Subdivision. KUB applicant.
This is a project that's just within the Concord Hills subdivision, just parts of the subdivision. KUB is replacing about 1,400 linear feet of existing steel gas main line with new 2-inch plastic main, and then they're also installing about 2,400 linear feet of new plastic gas main in the subdivision. I'm told they're doing the work internally with KUB staff, and they will be coordinating the right-of-way permit through our town engineering department. That would involve installing any silt fence if needed, making sure that affected residents are properly notified, coordinating traffic control as part of the project, which KUB's going to do that. That's fully part of their plans, of course, to do that. Basically, the staff does recommend approval of this utility project subject to the 4 items that were included in the staff recommendations. And those deal with obtaining the right-of-way permit. They are going to be using directional boring on pretty much all of it unless they run into some site-specific issue, but it will be all directional bored. And they, again, we just need to coordinate in the field with our engineering department as far as the specifics and the right-of-way permit. They do have a representative here if you have any specific questions related to this project. Again, it's not all of Concord Hills, as you saw in the packet. It's just certain street sections that would be affected at this time. They are going to be notifying the residents about this ahead of time, and I think they're anticipating to start in first part of February.
Will the representative please come up to the microphone, please?
While he's coming up, do you guys, Commissioner St. Clair, do you guys have an email system in your neighborhood?
Yeah, we got it.
So that you guys can make sure you're staying up aware of
And we
that?
got we also have the homeowner association is plugged into it.
Okay.
Tell us who you are, please. Give us an address.
Rob Calori, an engineer in gas systems engineering at KUB.
I have a question. How did you determine that this needed to be reworked at this time? And are there other areas that will come up in the future?
Sure. So this subdivision was identified as having the main driver for it. There's two main portions. One would be the steel, which is what we're going to replace with plastic, and that comes up on some annual leak surveys that we do. And it was identified that there was a couple very, very minor leaks in the steel, just part of aging. They get corrected, but rather than having to continue to deal with it, we just replace it with plastic. And then on top of that, the additional 2,400 feet of plastic would be resiliency to add in loops so that if something happens in one section, it minimizes the outage to customers, and you can maintain service to a vast majority of the subdivision at any given time.
That's good. So this is something, have you checked the rest of that particular neighborhood for?
Yeah, so that whole neighborhood essentially, or most of it will all be then tied in together through multiple loops so that you'll have that resiliency, and then all of the steel will be replaced.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
What's the life expectancy of the plastic?
That's what I was going to ask.
It is, we have some pipe in from the 70s that's still good and working. So if that's a reference, I mean, that's what, almost over 50 years. We have some that I've off the top of my head, I remember from 74. So just about 50 years. It's pretty resilient, unless there's a dig-in or something like
If
that.
you're a person, if you're a pipe, you're old.
Agreed.
I have a question. In looking at your work here, it looks like you're going to have some gas outages for some of the residences. And you're going to have, looks like two types. One where you're actually switching a residence from the old line to the new line. But you're also switching from the old line to the new line where dozens of residences are impacted during that transition. So could you take a minute and explain how that process works and how long people can expect to be without their gas supply during those transitions?
Yeah, definitely. So in total, there's 15 services that are going to be specifically tied over to this new main we're installing. And what that entails, it's a one-day thing. The outage would be typically no more than an hour. And we'll specify, this is again going to start in early February is when we're planning. So we know in advance we're not going to work on days that are particularly cold. And if we did, we'd wait until if midday temperatures would get above 40 or so, and we work that. As for sections where the main is being replaced, which affects a number of customers, what we do is leave the existing one energized until the new one is in and also has gas on it, and then we just do those tie-overs, which then is again an hour or less outage. So no one's going to be out for more than that little tie-over of their service individually. So you're not going to have a block of people out at any given time because both the steel main that's being replaced and the new main would be hot at the same time.
Everybody get their showers in early, and then you're not going to do this until a little bit later in the day. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yeah.
What sequence you're going to proceed through? You're going to start at the entrance and go around, or are you going to start in any particular order?
Likely, they'll start at the entrance and kind of work their way around. I can't really speak to that specifically. That would kind of be the construction supervisor who would do that. That would be my recommendation. And again, that's the logical way to do it, so I think that's what will happen, yeah. And in turn,
How long will it take you to complete the project?
we have it scheduled for, I believe, 3 months, but it should take less than that, probably 2, no more than that.
And you all are in agreement of the, dealing with the 4 issues that the town still has here?
That's correct.
One more comment that I have. Most of this is boring, so you shouldn't have a lot of disruption of the surface, but you will have some, obviously, where there's tie-ins, et cetera. I ask that you be sensitive to it's almost all residential. In fact, I think it's all residential. So if you disturb the ground, it's going to be somebody's yard. So I ask that you be sensitive to what you're disturbing. And I bring this up because we've had residents who've complained about work similar to this, where they've had reseed 2 or 3 times after the utility left because they did such a poor job. So I ask that you be sensitive to that and perhaps discuss with the residential landowner what's going to work for him.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I can say that KUB did some work in front of my yard, my neighbor's yard, 2 years ago, and they restored it back very well.
Okay, yeah, that's what we plan to
I
do.
expect the same thing this time.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
None.
For approval, subject to the 4 stipulations.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Item number 5, discussion is public hearing on a site plan for the Ivy Farms Clubhouse off Road B in the Ivy Farms Subdivision, 52.3 acres, zoned R-1 OSR, site incorporated applicant.
Similar to what we did with the Brookmere subdivision off Virtue Road, this applicant is requesting a site plan approval for their clubhouse so they can get started working on that aspect of the development. This is on the north side of Union Road, the single-family detached development, Ivy Farm subdivision. As you come in off of Union Road, the street is currently not named because we haven't platted that aspect of the subdivision yet, but you come to the first roundabout, and in the corner there is where the clubhouse is proposed, and this is kind of the site layout of what they have. They have a pool, a clubhouse, the mailbox kiosk is on the lower part of the site development plan here in this general area, so that people, as they come in or leave the subdivision, can easily access the mail. And then, let's see here, let me go to the next slide. Got some, just to show you what the building elevations look like. When they first came in before staff developer meeting, most of the clubhouse building was hardy board, and we asked them to revisit that to be in compliance with our architectural design standards. So now they're proposing basically white painted brick on most of the building. It is at least 75% masonry. It doesn't meet our masonry standards now. So that's pretty much what the clubhouse would look like. I don't know if anybody has any questions or concerns or anything about that. The remaining comments were pretty minimal. We only had 6 that were left, and most of those should be pretty easy to address, adding some clarifications or notes to plans, and just reminding the applicant that the landscape plan will have to be presented to the VRB and approved by them. Basically, this is, on this development, obviously there's not any finished streets in there, so it's a little bit, you may ask, well, how are they going to get a building permit for this? They don't even have any streets in there. Well, it's one big parcel right now. It hasn't been final platted, so it's their one building permit that they can obtain on that big parcel. So that's why they could go forward with that. I think they want to go ahead and try to get started with this. I imagine they probably will use that as a sales office during construction. So that's kind of an answer to that question, because it is pretty incomplete out there right now. It's a work in progress. So does anybody have any questions or?
Landscaping requirements around it, do you know?
Landscape plan, there is, basically the landscaping has to meet the same requirements as site development, which you take the footprint area of the coverage on the lot and divide that square footage by 2,500. That tells you you have to have a certain minimum number of shade trees on the lot. They don't have any stormwater detention on this particular lot, so that wouldn't come into play, nor do they have a buffer strip on this lot. So it's mostly just the shade tree requirements and the requirement for planting around the, between the building and the parking lot, the landscaping around the building and parking lot, which they will be doing that. So
Refresh my memory on what the width is on that grass strip between the road and
that
sidewalk.
is going to be 6 feet because it's a local street. Out at Union Road, most of that will be 8 feet, but this will be 6 feet. As you remember, we changed our grass strip width maybe a year and a half ago or so from 3 feet to 6 feet on
Yep.
local streets because we were finding that a lot of times developers would still go ahead and try to plant street trees, but the 3-foot space was just simply not wide enough for street trees. So we want to encourage, street trees to be planted, so we're trying to provide for more physical space so that would be a better end result instead of us having to go back and fix sidewalk or curbing get damaged, because the tree roots start to expand into the sidewalk or the street and create issues. So.
And Mark, this one building works with our requirement that the street be developed through the Swan property. It's okay to go ahead with that one building permit?
Yeah, before they can get any residential building permits, the roundabout has to be finished and the Ivy Farms Road, both of those have to be finished and final platted before they can actually start building houses in the development.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I just quickly, because I'm looking at this, lucky me, I get to be right by that roundabout. So not only do I have a road right behind me, I'll have the clubhouse and the pool right behind on that. So between the road traffic and the clubhouse the pool sounds, it's going to be kind of loud in my backyard. And I'm wondering if you guys are doing anything around the pool to kind of give that some privacy, even because the road is right there. That's going to be a heavily traveled road right there, in and out of the neighborhood.
That may be addressed in the landscape plan as well, some sort of planted buffer.
Yeah.
Of course, number 5 is a lighting plan that showed the foot candles so that you don't have a light pollution.
Annette Hummel, Site Incorporated, 10215 Technology Drive. We are heavily landscaping that site. But to your point, maybe we could add some additional evergreens around the pool area. Something taller. We've got, I'm trying to remember what's back there right now. Probably some medium height shrubs there now, but.
You might want it just for the privacy of the people that are utilizing the
Yeah.
pool, because I don't think that it would be very enjoyable to use that and then look up and have all your traffic, hey, as you're hanging out there in your bathing suit.
Yeah.
So just a thought and I'd love to see evergreens on the other side as well, but I know that dips down really far. It's
On the other side of the street?
yeah. And a lot of the neighbors on that side are a little concerned because there isn't a required buffer on that side. But there's a lot of, especially towards the front, that road comes very close to the backs of the houses on Stall and Serenity.
Okay.
So they're a little concerned about that. And we didn't require that, although I didn't see the landscaping plan. I just assumed it was required all the way around, and it's only on the side for Saddle Ridge. We don't have buffer planning required on the Fox Run side.
Should.
Or at least evergreens, because I think that's what people on that side would like to see at that point, because it's a road and you're not backing up to houses. On the Saddle Ridge side, they're all backing up to houses. Of course, up you go further in Fox Run, that road comes away.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of open space over there, but the people down at the lower end are impacted, so I think it's something we need to talk about.
Mark, can you show us where this is in the subdivision? For some reason, there may be a misunderstanding. I thought this was at the entrance of the subdivision, this clubhouse.
At one time, with
Back a
the
little
concept
bit,
plan, I think,
yes.
We were purchasing a piece of property
At the
at
entrance?
the entrance, and they didn't.
This is
they-
not the Union Road roundabout. This is an internal
Yes.
roundabout.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. You actually get, they have the smaller lot part of the Ivy Farm development in the southern part as you come in off of the Union Road roundabout. It'll be on the west side of the road.
So this
Then
will
you
be on the
go-
north side of the creek.
Yeah, the creek is just to the south
Okay.
of that.
That's why I was, when
Yeah.
Louise said it backed up to her, I was like, I don't know how it's even close to her, but now I understand
Yeah.
when it's on the north side of the creek. For some reason, I thought it was
Yeah,
on the south
originally
side.
they were going to put the clubhouse actually on the east side of the road coming off of Union Road. And that
In the
was
south
a
side of the
separate
creek, kind of
piece
between
property.
Union and the creek.
That's where
Yeah.
it is.
Okay, I got you.
So
Moved
this
it
is
to the
this
west
is Union
and
Road. It
further.
comes
Yeah,
over
and there's
that's
yours is
it.
like right in there.
Yeah, I'm right there, and yeah.
Okay, I got you. That makes sense now.
You see right here, it's going to come in right here. So that's what you're looking at. Is this roundabout is there?
Okay.
If I were using the pool, I'd be concerned about noise coming from your house.
Well, yeah, so that's where it is. I don't know if you.
Be selling tickets.
And you all are okay with all the subject
Yes,
twos?
yes.
Would that be something you
Oh,
would
yeah.
see if we could ask them to look at with the clubhouse landscaping and maybe
RB submittal.
look at maybe beefing up the landscaping
Fade out
where
soon.
where the road gets closer to Fox Run possibly? I know you'd have to obviously ask the owners, but back, if you remember when this was presented to the planning commission, the reason a lot of Fox Run doesn't have the required 25-foot buffer is there weren't any house lots that were platted immediately adjacent to house lots like in Saddle Ridge.
Right.
There was kind of a open space that was between the new house lots in Ivy Farm subdivision and Fox Run. But Louise is right, there's sections where the road itself gets, relatively close to Fox Run.
This was looked at as with the other location in mind. I think once the pool area moved, and
Yeah.
there was no thought put into, well, we should have made sure that there's a planning in that particular area right there.
Well, I mean, I think we can do that tonight.
Yeah.
We can, especially with the clubhouse. This is a new submittal.
Yeah.
And so I think the applicant's willing to work with us and try to figure out a way that creates somewhat of a buffer along that strip, which looks like maybe it's a few hundred feet until it starts veering off to the west along,
It gets wide.
adjacent to this, right, before it widens away and starts getting away from that perimeter boundary line. You're nodding that you think you can talk to your developer?
I will talk to them, yes.
Is that something we need to put in add to our subject twos, Mark?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's something that you could add for them to.
Needs to be added number 6, really.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Or do you have anything else you want to say on that?
I just want to clarify that. Are we looking for the full screen, or are we just looking for an evergreen planting?
Well, I don't know what the difference is. What?
Well, the full
Well, there's
screen
some
is
buffer
so many
required.
trees per 100 feet and so many shrubs and.
Evergreen planting would be, certainly, if you look at and I know the terrain right where I am, it dives down. I can't see how you can really put in a full screen like what's required
Yeah.
on the other side. And I think evergreens would probably do better in that area, I think, possibly. But it would also provide the screen that I think people are looking for.
You're really not talking that many. I'm looking at GIS right now, and there's really just a couple of lots that it affects before it starts. Otherwise, you've got the big open space lot, the one in Fox Run that has the soccer field on it. I don't think that buffers should be required adjacent to that one. But I think as you get up to Stall Drive, I think it would make sense to
And
have a
Sherman.
buffer behind a couple of, between your roadway and those lots. And then it starts veering off to the west, and
It
it's
does,
kind
yep.
of a non-issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're also, I know it's not evergreen, but planting street trees
Yeah.
along through there as well.
You'll be hard pressed right there, right where it's kind of comes into the roundabout. I guess they're going to do more grading, but it's a pretty steep
Yeah.
steep up there. I think some of the neighbors have already kind of climbed over their back fence and planted some of their own So, you'll probably see plants out there, but yeah, I think that would be sufficient.
Annette, out of experience, I've had really good luck out of eastern red cedars versus doing Lelands. I think the lifespan of a cedar far exceeds a Leland, even though they don't grow quite as fast, but
Right.
they're indigenous to East Tennessee, and there's a reason why we've got lots and lots of them everywhere in East Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I like the green giant arborvitae as well.
That's pretty good.
Right, so I think there's some options there that
Yep.
would make sense, and so I don't think we're talking about full buffer requirements.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like I could commit to a subject to, but I
Should we table this to the next meeting?
really don't want to do that either.
Well, I mean,
Just, maybe you could have in your subject too that you requested them to look at that, with staff, and we can,
If staff feels like they need to kick it back to planning commission, then
Yeah,
you could.
we could
Well,
do
I think would be,
that
I'd
to-
be comfortable with that.
as I
Let
understand
staff
where
make that
that's coming
determination.
from, she can't commit
Right.
to something that involves.
Well, you're spending somebody else's dollars.
Somebody else's
Well,
money.
how about if we do
Yeah.
it this way? If we put that on the VRB?
That's a good idea,
Yeah.
because that has to go to the.
Yeah.
Because that'll give me time
It would
to,
be on that, yeah, and that's pretty much the end of January, that meeting. I believe it's
Yeah.
like the
Okay.
28th.
At least that way, if you guys wanted to go and get started with your footers or foundation work for this particular facility, you could.
yeah,
But just keep in mind, expect that requirement when you get to VRB, so there's no
absolutely.
surprises.
Okay,
yeah, we don't want to have the same type of discussion then.
no.
How do you want to phrase that with this?
I
Just,
think you kind of covered it when item number 6, talking
Okay.
about the landscape plan. So I think it's covered with your 6 subject
Yeah.
twos.
Yeah.
okay, all right, so we don't need to add anything to that. Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
To approve with the 6 subject twos?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on the site plan for an addition to the Farragut Christian Church at 138 Admiral Road, 5.1 acres, zoned R-1, and FPD Johnson Architect Applicants.
This is the church on Admiral Road, just as you come in off of Kingston Pike on the east side, come down the hill, just past the floodplain. And what they're proposing with this particular site plan is about an 8,800 square foot building. It would be, just to orient you here, Admiral Road is out here. The building that they're proposing is over here in kind of the eastern part of the property. There's a floodplain that's basically along the south part of the property. They actually have a couple of parcels, and staff really would recommend the church look at that at some point to combine these two parcels, because there's actually, and I don't really know the history of this, but there's a parcel that runs right through here. So the church's parking lot is kind of bisected by two properties. It would probably be cleaner at some point in the future just to have that property line dissolved so that it's all in one piece of property. But since it's kind of an existing condition and they're not really making it any worse, that's just something to, suggest that they look at. They are reconfiguring some of the parking in this area here that's shaded to make it handicap accessible and easier to access that portion of the building. Really there were a few relatively minor subject twos at your places. The drainage calculations were submitted, and the town engineer was okay with those, actually. So most of what's left are pretty much, administrative items for the most part. I'm not sure about the site lighting, if they're even proposing any. That's something that maybe they can talk about later. The only thing, I guess, for discussion is there's one elevation that does not meet our 75% masonry requirement, and that's this eastern elevation. And I think that was included in the write-up. But basically, the reason that they're proposing for that to be, at this point, kind of a hardy board siding, is that they have plans in the future to maybe expand in that direction. And so they don't want to, spend a lot of money on that particular elevation if the thought is that in the near future, they're going to be taking that wall out to expand further to the east. Now, these are the elevations. The top two elevations do meet our masonry requirements. The lower elevation is the one I was just talking about on the east side. I'm not sure what, and that does not meet our, it doesn't even come close to meeting the masonry requirements. So that's something that, I think we need to talk about. If there's some kind of time limitation you want to consider on that particular elevation. Staff understands the logic of their request. I think it's, it makes sense to me if they have plans in the very near future to do something on that side of the building, to not, go to the trouble of putting brick on that particular elevation. But, I don't know that you want to leave it open-ended too long, because then, it may be 10 years before, and it may never happen as well. So that's just something to think about. So that's kind of an overview of what they're proposing. They're reworking some of the stormwater on the project just to the east there, and you can see where they've padded out where that building might expand to in the future. And then they have the detention basin further to the east. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. I think the architect and engineer are here if you have any questions of them as well.
It makes a lot of sense. It's just, we sure didn't fathom that when we adopted the architectural design standards. That's just one that we just didn't anticipate. That's the clear span side of their building, and that is the logical side. It also faces a non-right-of-way. There's a couple of houses back in, what would that be, probably Stonecrest, that they're backyards, but it's really out of sight, out of mind back there. But again, we need to figure out the hardship and the if we're going to grant a variance for that, just figure out we have a real good rationale for granting a variance if somebody else doesn't come to us and say, hey, we want to expand someday too. So I think Mark's right, is kind of maybe along the right lines. I think about our church and some of our growth, and our growth takes a lot longer, and fundraising takes a lot longer. So I don't want to tighten them up so tight that they have an unreasonable, or we have an unreasonable expectation of expansion. But it does seems like it makes sense to be able to come up with a timeline that works. Maybe we could hear from some representatives from the church about maybe what their timeline is for their growth.
Sorry, I don't normally talk like this, but I'm getting over the never-ending cold. I'm Joey Stats, Johnson Architecture. And to speak on that a little bit, I can't speak on behalf of the church as far as when they estimate time frames, because as you spoke on that, it really deals with their funding and kind of generating interest. But to give a background on this, this was actually all supposed to be a one-phase project, and we had designed it as such to be a gym expansion on that was going to be their future fellowship hall. And when we went through the schematic design portion of it, it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to fund all of it at once. So we went to a two-phase proposal at that point. So it's hard to say that it's going to be 1 year, 2 years down the road, but their initial goal was to actually build this as one development.
When you say this, is this the phase 2 or the phase 1?
This is the phase 1. Phase 2 would be the expansion that we're talking about.
That would be the gym?
That would be the gym that's going off the elevation, the east elevation that's in question.
What percentage are we right now, Mark, overall?
Well, like I said, they're compliant on the other two elevations.
Yeah.
The one elevation, of course, abuts the existing building, but the eastern, I think, is a little over 20%.
22, I believe, if I remember.
That's pretty well under the, yeah.
Well, what's a reasonable time frame, do you think, if you want to put a time frame on it?
We've done timeframes in the past too, but it's also where you have to come back and revisit it. They could come back and near the end of that timeframe and ask for, extension or something, but they have to have some, good justification for it. But I think we've used 5 years and we've used 10 years in the past on a couple. It's not.
I wouldn't want to go over 5 at all.
Yeah.
And they can come back and say if they're not ready, that they certainly,
Visit again.
yeah.
That seems
And-
reasonable, yeah.
Okay.
And if at some point in time that's not going to happen, the expansion, can brick or whatever the other material you're using,
What you're saying is design a footer to be able to handle brick.
Yeah.
In the event you needed to come back and veneer it.
We've done geotech on this. It should be standard spread footings on this, so it shouldn't be any issue to run
You might want
brick
to
off
think
the
about
foundation.
your soffit and brick pocket and things like that. If they
Right.
did have to come back and add some brick, I mean,
Yeah.
of course, that maybe they only added brick up to 8 or 10 feet, kind of like similar to what they're doing. Maybe
Right,
they wouldn't have to rework their soffit that way.
We would pick a percentage
Okay.
and run that up a certain height, similar to what's happening on the other side of the elevations.
If we did that, would that still require a variance? I mean,
No, not really. I think you're just giving them a
Just make
time
it-
frame. They're ultimately going to be in compliance, I think, it's just you're extending the time frame
Okay.
within which compliance would occur.
I kind of like
Now,
the way
how
you're
we
rolling
track
this.
that's going to be, I'm going to have to, make sure we have something that can track it.
You put a
know.
tickler on your calendar 5 years
Yeah,
out.
I guess so.
Somebody's down 5 years from now.
5 years from now, so.
Or the Episcopal
Yeah.
Church sanctions it should be
Mark,
a year.
have you seen the whole plan for 1 and 2?
The whole what?
Plan for phase 1 and
I've
2?
not seen the gymnasium, no.
So I think that's a part of our justification, that they supposedly already have a phase 2 plan made, so that helps us justify it. It's not a wish list.
Nebulous
It's not
idea,
just a
yeah.
wish list, it's something that they do have planned, and it's a matter of funding, and makes it a little more definitive, I think.
Yeah, we have plans and renderings of that phase as well, if that would help to submit that.
I think it would, particularly, you've still got to go to the VRRB for your landscape.
Correct.
For your landscape plan, I think you ought to probably be able to have it within, shouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess would that could meet the masonry requirement whenever you,
That's what you're saying
expanded part.
is your full plan, if you'll submit some renderings,
Yes.
schematic designs, fine.
Yeah.
And make sure that meets the requirement, and that way we'll attach it to the minutes. If there's ever an issue years from now, we say, well, here it is, this is what was approved.
Okay.
We just gave them more time.
Absolutely.
What we're just trying not to create the proverbial slippery slope.
I understand.
A future slippery slope.
That's right. Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
probably involve staff recommendation item number 4, I guess. And we could provide a time frame on that.
So we probably need to reword that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would.
that item number 4. I'm trying to think.
Okay, Noah.
I'm not sure where to start on how to wordsmith this, but I'm trying to think about how to, I know what our intent is. I'm trying to figure out how we need to make it real simple. That way somebody, some years from now, if they're maybe the same, not the, a different leadership, a different architect can understand what was approved and what expectations that we have. So I think we need to dumb it down as much as possible, just so it's very clear and concise.
Not knowing who's going to look at it in the future.
That's right.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'm trying to figure out that subject too, what the language is.
Committee on wording.
Joe, you have an idea?
Yeah,
You're a professional with this. What do you think would be
You're gonna
something
put me on the
fair
spot on
to
that.
insert in there? The
I would
Afgas-
start with this, per the northeast side, northeast building elevation, architectural, what do we call those, architectural design requirements?
or
The
ADS, our
brick-
design standards.
design standards.
Masonry.
Regarding masonry
Percentage.
percentage.
Masonry requirements in architecture.
Maybe shall be waived. We're waiving these requirements on that northeast elevation for a period up to not to exceed 5 years.
Yes.
Yeah,
I guess we're making some-
Temporarily. Waiver.
Yeah.
Just a-
upon review of,
I think that's it.
That's it?
I think
Just
that'll
that?
do it, really.
Okay.
That's simple.
5 years.
You want to read it and see what our applicant thinks of that, Louise? Just make sure he understands it, and he's going to have to go back to his bosses and explain it to them, and ultimately the church leadership.
All I have is per the northeast building elevation masonry requirements. Is that enough to say requirements instead of?
Masonry requirements in the architectural design standards are
Architectural
waived for a
design.
period not to exceed 5 years from the date of this conditional approval. Date of this.
Well, yeah, it'll be today.
but-
It's an action item tonight. So that clock will start today.
In
Anticipation of
anticipation of a
phase 2.
of a Phase 2 expansion as submitted to town staff or something. I don't know. So we
Louise,
could put
so
that
was
in
that
the
a
record.
motion?
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Just to be clear, are we needing to submit that Phase 3 set of drawings in the VRB or
No,
separate?
I think, they wouldn't
I
really.
think you need to
All I heard
have
was
it.
That's
phase
more of
2.
the
I thought we were talking
landscape.
phase 1 and
I'm sorry.
You need to have the phase 2.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Submit to the staff.
We need to have phase 2.
we do need
Correct.
we need
it
the
for
whole
file,
plan
for the
so we can
record
we
of the
can
minutes.
we can attach
Yeah.
the whole plan as one.
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody ever comes back to us and says, "Hey, why'd you let them do that?" It's not stucco. I think it's a hardy plank. Why'd you let them do that big hardy plank wall? Well, we've got all the documentation.
Sure.
Yeah,
Here,
what
this
I would,
is-
yeah,
this is
what
the
I would
reason why.
plan to do is just take that rendering, assuming it's compliant, it would be compliant, and I would attach that exhibit to the minutes of
Exactly.
this meeting.
Okay.
So that when we go back and look at minutes, then we've got it documented as what it was, what the conditions were, and, it's all pretty
Light of
straightforward.
a phase 2.
Yeah, there's no
And what
ambiguity.
Phase 2 consisted of.
Yeah, so,
I don't mean you're locked into that whenever you do get ready to do phase 2, but that's,
Yeah, if you want
Right.
to tweak phase 2 and start doing some other things, we just
It'll just have to meet the design standards.
it just needs to
Right.
meet the
Correct.
design standards. That's correct.
Okay.
In 5 years, they're supposed to come back and they either get extended
So yeah,
Yeah, there's got to be brick put on.
or less than that if their
extension
growth
granted.
requires it. So
5 years being the longest time.
yeah.
Could be, like you said, 1 or 2 years,
Do we have something in there, or do we need something to say that
No.
if this doesn't happen, what needs to be done?
Keep it on this calendar.
That they need to
if it doesn't happen and we don't grant an extension, they would just have to make that elevation compliant with the ADS requirements.
Right.
Those might be amended 5 years.
Well, yeah, I was
from
going to say
now,
5
you
years
know?
from now, who knows? We may go back to stucco.
So, whatever the requirements would be, then they'll have to comply with that, I guess.
So we're good with the wording and
I think, so I've
good with the
kind
wording?
of got the general idea, I think.
Did we? I think we had a motion and a second, but I don't know if we had a vote on it yet.
No, and yet,
Yeah, so that's the motion. Do I hear a
Louise made the
second?
motion, I seconded. I think we all have a reasonably clear understanding of what the motion was. So I think the applicant does, and Mark's got make some
I
good
was about
notes
to
up
say the
there.
applicant's the one that
Yeah.
needs to be clear.
I'm good.
Okay, so got a first and I got a second? All those in
No.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So we'll see you back here in at least 5 years.
All right.
Thank
I'll,
you.
I'll set that on my calendar.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah.
No,
so
7, we're
that's
not.
off.
Okay, so we're on to number 8, discussion and public hearing on a request for approval for the MCI microfiber installation project along portions of Admiral Road, Campbell Lakes Drive, North and South Campbell Station Road, Everett Road, Fretz Road, Grigsby Chapel, Herron Road, Kingston Pike, Municipal Center Drive, Parkside Drive, Sonia Drive, Station Road, and Woodland, Station Roads West and Union Road, Virtue Road, West End Avenue, West Point Drive, North Watt Road, and Woodland Trace Drive. Mass Tech applicant.
Madam Chairman, I didn't hear that. Could you go through that again?
I tried to get them all in alphabetical order. I don't know if there's many streets left, but Mostech is the same group that's been working on fiber installation in the town for a while. They started out at Kingston Pike, working at R-1 Road and some other areas. And they've worked really well with our engineering staff. We've had a good relationship with them. They do what they say. And so one thing I asked them to do, because this obviously is a very big linear project, it's all in the public rights of ways. Some of it's in state right of way. A lot of it's in the town's right of way. I asked them to try to break this project down into phases and to make it a little bit more manageable. And for each of these 6 phases, this is about a 6-month project from start to finish, unless they run into some issues. But the right-of-way permits would be structured so that they would be issued per phase. So we would, meet the contractor out in the field for, say, phase 1, look at that area, discuss any potential conflicts or things that they might need to be aware of, and then they would move forward with the right-of-way permit. Phase 1 is the area that's on North Campbell Station, Sonia Drive, Woodland Trace, Herron Road, and actually goes into Sweetbriar Subdivision. That would be the first phase that they're doing, and that is generally this area right here. You will see next month, very likely, there's going to be probably 2 small cell structures on the application, on the agenda for Sonia Drive, a couple of different locations there, and then one on North Campbell Station Road in this general area. So what they're doing is installing the fiber that will be able to support the 4 and 5G small cell support structures that we'll be seeing a lot of in the next few years.
You said 2 on Sonia and 2 on
Well, right now they've applied for, it's a different group, but Tower Source has applied for 2 structures on Sonia Drive. They've applied for 12 total. I'm just talking about in this general phase 1 area. There's a couple on Sonia. There's one at North Campbell Station Road right across from the primary school.
There's a couple on Sonia, but there's another one on Deneen, and that's
Deneen, and that's not in this project area. That was kind of an interesting.
Well, no, they're showing it on the map.
Does it go? Okay, maybe that's
it goes all the way up Sonia. It
Yeah, I
comes
guess
down
that is
Admiral
right,
and
yeah.
then over to Deneen.
Yeah, that's
Oh, no, I'm
true.
sorry,
Deneen's the one-
Dundee.
That little dog leg.
Yeah,
I
that's
think that
Dundee.
on
would be maybe
Yeah.
this area right there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there is one in Deneen that's proposed in Stonecrest.
And then
yeah.
there's one in Turkey Creek Woods. So, and I don't.
The Cove at Turkey Creek. I don't think it's part of that phase. I don't believe. That might be in phase 3.
You're
Looks
saying
like
you've received an application for that?
That's
So that
next
means
month.
You've received it already?
12
Yeah.
poles.
Clock already.
No, that's not really the way it works. You've got 30 days from when it's submitted to review
Yeah.
the application and indicate whether it's complete or not, and provide them feedback.
You're on the clock for 30 days.
We are. We are. And then we give them feedback, then the shot clock stops.
Yep.
And then they address the feedback, and then it starts again when we get the resubmittal.
Does it start all over again?
No.
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 It's a 60.
No, it resumes where it was at, and then the goal is 60 days to vote it up or down. And if you vote it down, you have to be very clear about why you voted down. You have to have some good reasons for it, obviously.
These are the small cell sites that we've got a couple over on Parkside Drive, kind of
Yeah,
like
like the Zayo ones that were installed a few years ago. They're, anywhere between, and the ones that we've seen submitted, they're from 26 feet to about 43 feet in height.
26 or 43?
26 to 43
26
feet
to 43.
is the general range on the ones that have been submitted to the staff so far. We're in the process of reviewing those.
They can be 10 feet taller than the tallest pole in the neighborhood, and those neighborhoods have existing utility poles.
Yeah.
At least Stonecrest, and
So what happens to a neighborhood that has all underground utilities?
it can be
25? That's you got to air to.
taller than that. I can't.
Well, yeah, We'll get to that next
Okay.
time. 'cause
Well, we're
this
getting ahead of
is really
ourselves, I'm just
a-
curious.
Not to
an
worry about.
underlying-
Don't
I'll
have
send
to
that
worry
out to
about it.
everybody. There's a document that MTOS and TML worked on
Yeah, it's a good
together.
summary.
Okay.
It's a really,
Send it out today.
Not the same one you sent out.
Well, I've sent out one, but that's,
I'll send out what I
66
sent out to the neighborhoods.
66 page?
yeah, it's the same one. Yeah.
Well, there was one, we had a special workshop on it a year or two ago.
Yeah.
That's the same.
No, this is a new report,
Okay.
relatively new that they did.
Together, it's fairly easy to understand, at least
Yeah.
from our perspective, the physical structures, where they can go and how much you can ask them to move them. depending
I'm getting
on-
nervous. I can hear some apprehension in your voice.
I don't feel like we have a lot of say over
Okay.
it.
Well,
We'll
they
deal with
break-
it next month, I guess.
Basically, what that report does is breaks down the state's law. that,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
The state passed a law over a
2011
year ago, you know,
Last
to
year.
try to,
I guess the upside is these
told you some time
folks that
frame.
live on the streets will be the first ones to get 5G. So,
yeah, most of these are 5G.
Yeah.
That's been submitted, actually. We have-
But
I
the
think-
FCC passed rules at September of 2018 as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if the state law follows the FCC rules.
the
'cause I'm
federal
think-
law, okay.
I'm wondering if the FCC is a little bit more, gives us a little bit more freedom. I'd like to know that.
Okay.
Well, on this particular project that's before you, this is an underground project. I don't believe there's any overhead that they're using on this fiber. I don't believe. And they've broken it down, like I said earlier, into 6 phases. You know, it's basically like any linear project, similar to what we talked about with KUB. You know, they need to coordinate their work, and they have in the past with their work, with their engineering staff, and make sure that, you know, affected areas are restored to their you know, disturbance condition, I guess. You know, coordinate traffic control, you know, make sure that they're trying to not damage existing infrastructure, sidewalks, and, you know, landscaping and things like that. So a lot of the subject twos from the staff's review deal with those items, the same thing that we dealt with KUB. Just basically being a good neighbor and fixing back the areas that are disturbed. Again, most of this is going to be underground, but they will have to come up, of course, you know, at various locations. So we just want to make sure that they minimize the impact. And like I said earlier, they've worked well with the town's engineering staff. They have been trying to minimize the impact, and I feel very comfortable with them doing that in the future. I think they will do that. Because it is such a large area, we would ask for a letter of credit to be provided. They've done that as well in the past with their 2 previous reviews from you all. And that way we've got kind of an assurance that if something happens and they don't fix an area or something gets damaged and it doesn't get properly repaired, then we would have the ability to go in and make those corrections. So the applicant is here. They have a number of people here. If you have any specific questions for the fiber project, then they might be able to answer some other things. But that's what's before you at this time, and we do recommend approval of this subject to those 5 stipulations.
Mark, before,
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
quite a bit of discussion about radioactivity in a neighborhood. Have them address that.
I don't know that they would need to address that. I mean, that's something that really you know, I'm certainly not an expert on that, and it's something that really, under the state and the FCC's regulations, communities can't really, you know, base their decisions on the perceived health impacts of these kind of devices and this kind of infrastructure. I mean, we're kind of, you know, limited on what we can do in that regard because the evidence has not really been proven that it does have an adverse impact. again, I'm not an expert on that, but that's something we can talk about, I guess, when the small cell structures come before you all. But this fiber installation certainly wouldn't, be anything that would have an impact, I would think.
Can I ask, how are you guys notifying?
First of all, let's get a representative up to tell us who you are and give
Sure.
us an address.
Mike Micah with MCI Verizon, 603 Warehouse Park Lane, Knoxville, Tennessee.
How are you notifying these, the community as you work through it? Because you're obviously, this first phase is going to be Sonia and Woodland Trace and Dundee and Deneen, and that's all residential. Herron, that's all. Are you telling you're sending out something to all of the residents on those roads?
Yeah, so how we do it currently is after, we come here and get y'all's blessings, then we go to Mark and committee and get our actual permits approved. So when those locates are called in to actually work those areas, at the same time the locates are called in, the crews hang door tags
Okay.
on every place we're working over that project.
On that, just that side of the road or on both sides of the road?
Well, we just have actually been doing the side of the road we're working on, but
Okay.
we're open to doing the entire neighborhood so everyone knows what's going on.
I think that would be very helpful since you are in residential areas and you're going to have people coming out. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? So you
We
might
get a
wanna do
firestorm
that.
of calls down here.
Yeah,
I know you do. Yes, sir.
we'll get those anyway, but people like to know what's going on.
Yeah, so we've been working in Farragut for about 2 years now, and we felt we've done a pretty good job, and we certainly, myself, I've supplied my personal phone number to Mark and everybody else, so I want feedback, and if my crews are not doing a good job, Verizon, MCI as a company, we want to know that because obviously our reputation, we need to keep it stellar as we can.
So you all are okay with the subject twos?
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
None.
They have a lot of detailed plans. I didn't want you to think that that's all they submitted. They have 77 pages of, and actually very good plans. If you looked at the plans that we used to get a few years ago, these plans now and even these small cell applications that will probably be coming in January are really good plans. I mean, they're pretty detailed and, again, there's going to be some site-specific things that you always have to work with, but they're a lot better than they used to be. That's for
Mark,
sure.
just for clarity, that first phase, it's Sonia and Dundee and Deneen and Woodland Trace
Herron.
and Herron, and is
Herron.
that Gates Mill Drive that it comes down
Looks like it
onto?
is Gates Mill, yeah.
The lower part. So you're aware of that? Okay. So I just wanted clarity on that first phase, because that is mostly
Yeah.
residential neighborhoods.
Yeah, that really is pretty much the most residential phase of the six.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the rest of it's along Kingston Pike or Parkside Drive or Watt Road.
Okay, thank you.
Questions or comments?
No.
Have a
Thank you.
motion?
Thank you very much.
We need to do a motion here before you,
Move for approval, subject to the 5 stipulation.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Mark, I have a question. Does the town have I don't want to call it an as-built, but do you all have an overall drawing that's showing where the existing fiber is currently? When you
Well,
get
I
these
think
as-built information, it
that's
gets
something we could-
transferred to? Or
Yeah, I mean,
does Darrell have something like?
I don't know if I know we've talked about this in the past, to trying to obtain, when you finish your work, to provide to the town electronic as-built of what they have so that we know in the future. what's out there and where it's at.
Yeah, so Mark, absolutely, when we, however you want it, we can give you as-bills for what we've already constructed, and, that our permits have been approved for up to this point in time, or we can wait till we're done with the project. However you all are the most comfortable.
Once you completely finish a section or an area, I would just go ahead and get the as-built submitted for that.
Okay.
And then, as you finish each of these phases, then, get the as-bills for that. It helps us a lot with, utility coordination and where these small cell structures are going to be situated. So it's, similar to what we require tonight from KUB. We just want to, the technology's there now that you can GPS these things. You can get this in on the front end as you're putting the conduit in the ground. So it just gives us a lot better information system, and we can put that in our GIS, layers.
So this is MCI, Metro Fiber.
Uh-huh.
Will there be other companies that come?
There probably will be, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there probably will.
You work
They're
exclusive?
Verizon. They're with Verizon. So I'm sure there will be, AT&T and potentially others. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay.
Does Mastech work exclusively for Verizon MCI?
No, throughout the country, they work for different, like in Nashville, they would do work for both MCI and AT&T.
You could be coming back through and doing more of it for another company?
Myself, no.
He's-
So everything we are building, MCI Verizon, is strictly for our own use. We generally speaking, we don't supply, band or fibers to other carriers.
But the people with who are actually doing the work do it for other companies as well.
Oh, yes. Many other companies.
Yeah, we've talked about, and we talked about this at the staff developer meeting, is, it's trying to coordinate this fiber installation and small cell structure installation. If you've got different, vendors in your community, I don't think we want to end up with these poles everywhere. And nor do we want to try to have a bunch of, somebody's got their section of fiber in, and then 3 months later, here comes AT&T and puts theirs in. You just have a constant disruption.
That's where I was going with that about.
So, you could think about maybe providing a certain conduit on the front end of new developments, but then there's, I don't know the logistics of that, whether that even makes sense, frankly.
I think what we were talking about was if a new subdivision was being put
Yes,
in,
right.
then we'd put like a 6-inch, I think.
Yeah, some kind of
You were there.
conduit that would be, any of these telecommunication entities could use it.
And I think you said a 6-inch would carry 4.
3. Oh, 4? Okay. So let me ask you this. If you have one runs through and then you want to put another conduit, another fiber optic through, how do you do that?
So we originally, first thing we do is we bore the dirt, and then we pull back in a conduit. When that conduit is pulled back in, then we insert cable into it. So we're using 2-inch HDPE in most of our installation. We can go back in with a smaller duct, an 18-millimeter duct, if we want to overpull that.
Okay.
And so it gives us the ability not only for, the whole densification project was designed to carry us for the next decade. I'm not sure with the explosion of technology that I think I'll actually be coming in and out of here for the next decade. So with the way things are going, but we do have expansion capabilities in what we're installing right now that we believe will carry us at least the next decade.
For Verizon?
Yes.
That doesn't apply to
Yeah.
the other 3 major carriers that
Yes.
might be coming through as well.
That's correct.
I think that's the frustration, is they haven't, the state or the FCC hasn't really thought through what that does to communities. because you're going to have, I was looking, I think I see 4, Sprint and, what was the other one they just merged? Sprint and T-Mobile merged, so that knocked 1 out, so now we've got 4 that I can think of that might have the wherewithal to put all this in, and then I'm thinking, okay, where are the poles? Can the poles, it's like McDonald's, where McDonald's goes, Wendy says, let's see, we just need to be in that area. So if Verizon comes in and does their, I look at it as a net, the next guy comes in and says, oh, they've got it figured out, let's put our pole right next to theirs. And could we have 4 poles?
It's just like we went through with cell
Wherever-
towers, and we had to go through, not everybody building their own tower, and I don't
So
know,
that's-
something's gotta happen in that arena.
Yeah, so they haven't really thought of the impact, because we're not allowed to keep
meddle.
any carrier out. So we kind of have to take what they give us, and so they haven't given us the ability to at least say, okay, you got to figure out a different location to put yours, because we don't want all these poles in one place. Or do we want all these poles in one place so they're not all over the place? It's,
You want 4 poles in front of your house?
I don't know. Not really.
We're not going to fix it tonight, that's for sure.
These are the
Right.
questions that the state legislation's going to have to kind of work through. They threw something out there, and I get the feeling it's going to have to be amended at some point, and there's going to be a lot of things that they're going to have to work through. So.
Thanks.
I think Carol
Thank
had,
you.
Thank y'all.
hey Rita, Carol she had something.
I didn't turn it off.
It's okay.
Carol Christofferson, 11320 Gates Mill Drive, Farragut. First of all, for the record, I am not a Luddite, and I am not a NIMBY. I'm perfectly happy with whatever this 5G stuff is going to be over time. I have no idea. This is actually imploring the Planning Commission and the town to protect the residents for just exactly what you just said, that we don't end up having all warring parties coming into our neighborhoods. That's all I'm asking. I'm not going to try to fight, the elephant coming down the road. So if you all would please just be mindful that we don't really want, we don't want 1 pole, but we are clearly not in any position to argue it, that we end up with 3 or 4 poles. And that I'd also like to clarify that why just in new developments will you hopefully require the 6-inch
Part of
conduit.
the installation of their utilities that they're putting in, that they
Well-
would put this conduit in as well.
Yeah, well, yes, no, I understand that. But for the old neighborhoods, we'd also like the 6-inch to go in so that we don't have this same issue with all the other ones wanting underground conduits and have to tear up the ground 2 or 3 times. So is there a reason why you can't put the biggest hole in?
The directional bore cost of a 6-inch is astronomically more expensive than doing even 3 2-inch. So the challenge in a new neighborhood, you can just open up a ditch and lay all your
Yeah,
utilities in a ditch.
clear.
When it's under, and so it's putting
Right.
a 6-inch is expensive still, but it's not near as expensive as trying to do a directional bore. And I think that's probably the challenge in an existing neighborhood is putting a 6-inch. I'm sure they have. I mean, I know the First Utility can do directional bores of stuff that big. It's just real expensive when you're doing directional bores.
Yeah,
that
and you
large.
know what I say, that's just tough.
Carol.
Older neighborhoods,
It may not be
The
us.
first user, the
Yeah.
first person comes in and has to put a 6-inch, the burden's on them, and have to recoup from either somebody came behind them. That would all
somebody
have
comes
to be-
behind them, yeah. Well,
would
that's
be an
really
absolute
punishing
flag.
older neighborhoods, though, to have a small bore go in. I'm not going to argue with you.
Well, there's-
I'm just asking that we don't want this to, I mean, the last time I was here and talked, it was with AT&T. It wasn't MCI. So, and the only reason that didn't go through was because of their kerfluffle in not getting you the right information. So are we talking about MCI going into that spot at the end of Herron Road at Gates Mill, and then in 3 to 6 months having AT&T come in?
Well, Carol.
I'm
this
just
is-
curious.
I know, and I'm in the same position you're in, but. our
You
hand-
got to be smarter at this than I am.
Well, and I read one booklet and it just unnerved me. The issues are, we may not be in a position to be able to require that. That, according to state law, there isn't a lot that we can require. So that's an argument to be made with our state legislators. That's why it's like I'm trying to get, I sent this out hoping that I sent this information out to our HOAs, hoping that we'd get some techies that really understand all this stuff to come together to indicate, these are the things we have to think about, this, and this, because I think state legislature is going to have to revisit this, and we should be well informed about the real issues that we're seeing. This is one of them.
The reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the reality
Yeah,
of
and
this
I'm not
coming-
arguing against the whole thing. It's wonderful technology. It's just fabulous. Aren't we all so happy with it? But I just want to educate. That's the big thing. And I've mentioned this to all of you, that the homeowners need to know what's going on. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol.
I can make a comment on that. I think if my recollection is correct, this country went through the same thing years and years ago with electric utilities. We had several franchises in one area, everybody trying to sell power, and eventually the states took over, and then you had a utility that had the exclusive use of these different areas, and then you had one supplier. So we're at a point now with the fiber networks that the utilities were 100 years ago or however long ago it was. So it's something that we are pretty much at this level helpless to do anything about. And as Louise said, it really needs to be taken care of at the state level to make some decisions on perhaps requiring large cables or large conduits in new neighborhoods or whatever, or if somebody's putting a conduit in an old neighborhood that it's big enough for everybody to use. But that's something that right now we are unable to do. As much as, and you said the residents want to know, well, we're all residents here too, by the way. So we're as concerned as you are about, I have no poles in my neighborhood. I don't want to see 15 poles go up from all these different companies. So we all feel exactly the same way. But because of the legislation at the national level and the state's implementation of that legislation at the state level, our hands are pretty much tied as to what we can do and what we cannot do. So I think this has to work itself out, and we can be vocal about it, but there's not much we can do to solve the problem.
Well, the citizens need, if we're concerned, collectively start working together to understand what the real issues are so that we can take them to our state legislators. Say, okay, this is, yes, you had this wonderful idea here. Here's how it is in practicality. And of course, one of our legislators is about to, no, his side isn't getting it in. The people below him or on Gates Mill are getting fiber put in there. So.
It will continue, but
Yeah.
to address one other thing you said, Carol, whenever these folks are doing directional bores so that it does the least amount of disturbance to a homeowner's property. When you're building a new subdivision, you're going to have a big ditch that you're going to have the utilities in, and that's the time that you could put in a 6-inch, and the cost would be very minimal to the developer. And if it's part of the subdivision regulations, then so be it. It's just like anything else. So, would you not agree?
Yes, 6-inch conduit is real darn expensive, whether you're open ditch and installing it or your directional bore installing it. So I think before we would jump to a conclusion to force all developers to install 6-inch.
How much is it?
That's right.
Well, I don't know, but I guarantee it's more than 3 2-inch conduits.
Okay.
Well, I mean, again, the 6-inch was just discussed as a
I know, we're just
random
throwing
discussion.
ideas.
Right, and you probably ask somebody, well,
So, yeah, I don't even
what
know
could
if
handle
that
lots of
makes
capacity? But my thought is, I mean, I think it warrants a little further research before we
Yeah, it does.
tie that into our
That's not
subdivision
really
regulations.
adding costs
It'd be
onto
better to
a
put
more
2
expensive process.
3-inch conduits in.
Yeah, he said
As
that the 1.5 inch, I think, was what was typical. And that was the reason in a 6-inch you could handle 4.
That's what he said
Yeah.
in that last meeting.
But again, you still have the pole issue, and is it better?
Yeah,
to
whether or
have-
not these small cells can share poles, I mean, I think
If they
that's.
do, they're have to go taller. So
Right.
the issue is, would you prefer to have a taller pole with two or three
couple of-
antennas on it, or shorter poles that
Right.
are dispersed throughout the community? Yeah.
Well, right now, the way the legislation's written, it doesn't anticipate, it's idealistic and it's like one system.
Yep.
It didn't.
There's a lot of detail stuff
it
that
doesn't
really
take into account at all an overlay of systems.
is tough. It's an evolving
Just-
thing too.
The technology is faster than
It's
the
not like
deployment
water and
process.
sewer. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. This is a technological
Deployment.
issue, and it's constantly changing. So even if you had the 6-inch conduit, you make that a requirement. That might be completely unnecessary at some point.
Sounds crazy, but I wouldn't be surprised if all the technology is obsolete in 20 or 30 years. I'll be satellite based.
It may be.
And then
Yeah.
who takes out all the poles?
Well, yeah, it doesn't help our overhead, electric, but it does. It would take care of cell towers, that's for sure.
From the end of a conduit, I know nothing. From the end of a conduit to the pole, right? How close do those have to be? And then, if you have somebody else who comes in who wants to do a pole, how do you don't use the same conduit, so you run it, what's the distance? Are you talking 2, 3 feet, 10 feet?
Yeah, that's the problem. This technology we just don't understand yet.
If you can come up.
Up. We'd
We'd
like to hear
love
about
to
it.
have you on the record. Everybody at home could hear you too.
My name is Jerry Guthrie. I live in Village Green. The maximum distance that these 5G poles can be spaced is 500 feet. These poles will have to be erected, and this is electromagnetic waves going through these lines, and 500 feet is the maximum that you can space those poles. 5G is they're going to a frequency of about 30 gigahertz, and it's got a bandwidth of millimeters, and that load will not go very far. So as far as it will carry is about 500 feet. So that's going to be the spacing on these poles, maximum. And 5G can be a health problem. It's radiation. Like she was talking about a while ago, it's dangerous. It's like X-rays or gamma rays. It's dangerous. We're going to be affected, each of you, people in here. I'm going to be affected by it. Our pets are going to be affected by it. Animals, plants, insects, birds. I used to run a lot. I still run for exercise. You see birds swarming everywhere through the air. They're no longer swarming through the air. Something's wrong. We need to step back, take a look. The FCC has done no studies on this 5G, and the wireless people have done no studies on it. We need to make sure, from a health standpoint, it's important for our health that we know what's going to happen. Right now, they don't know what's going to happen. They're going blind looking at this. It's going to affect us, and it's going to hit us hard. It's radiation. Just, I want you to make you aware of that. And we're looking, like I say, at these poles being maximum 500 feet. Verizon's going to do it. AT&T's going to do it. T-Mobile's going to do it. And there's going to be a bunch of poles out there less than 500 feet because there's going to be different wireless companies doing this. There's going to be clusters, and that radiation is going to be hitting you and me every day that we're outside our homes. We can shield our homes off. That signal won't go through brick, but the way it gets into the house, it goes through the windows. That's how it gets in. This is dangerous, so you need to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Jerry?
Mark, are we ready to move on?
Yeah, I guess. Anybody else have anything?
Did we already vote on that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, now we're, item number 9, discussion on and public hearing on amendment to Article 2B, Concept Plan 1N, Article 2C, Preliminary Plat 6Q, and Article 3A, Street 18, to clarify when a waiver may be considered in relation to vehicular pedestrian connectivity. Town of Farragut applicant.
Really just a clarification to amendments that we adopted about a year ago in the subdivision regulations to be really clear on the intent of when the commission can entertain a waiver of the vehicular connectivity requirement. You know, we adopted those amendments to our subdivision regulations to try to, in the future, not end up with single access subdivisions like we have all over town, to try to encourage, you know, connectivity, vehicular connectivity, because that was a major finding in our comprehensive land use update that was conducted in 2012. So as part of the amendments that were approved a little over a year ago, there were some conditions where the Planning Commission may consider granting a variance, and one of those was where the surrounding properties are existing house lots of less than 1 acre. The intent of that language, to me, is pretty clear. Is that you don't physically have any way to connect a street to an abutting development because you already have built house lots that abut that property that's being subdivided. So there's just physically not any space to do that. And that's why the acre was in there, because if you have a large tract, even if it's potentially part of another subdivision, there might be an opportunity in the future for a connection to occur if that large tract is further subdivided or something. So what we wanted to do is to make sure it was clear that we're not talking about somebody asking for a waiver, you know, just because they abut an existing subdivision that has house lots. That's not really the intent. It's where you have existing house lots, and we've left in there of less than 1 acre in size, that are so located to physically preclude or block a connection from occurring. That's really
That was our intent all along.
It's always been the intent. You know, if there's an opportunity to connect, that wouldn't come into play. But if there's physically just simply no room for a connection to occur because it's blocked by houses, then that's one of the conditions where a variance could be considered. So that's what we're recommending in this resolution, so that original intent is even more clear.
I take it you had somebody challenge our language?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Figured that.
Would that have given a waiver, like off the North Kingsgate stub through?
The only time we've given a waiver on that, North
in that
Campbell's
case, it wouldn't have affected that, though.
No.
Because there was already another tie-in, but it just had steep topography. So what we allowed them to do, we said, hey, you can slide over here, and their proposed tie-in actually was a better tie-in.
Yeah, it was. We did grant a waiver for
right away. I think we let them go to a 40-foot right of way and some other things to make it all work.
Like Brass Lantern is
has
one.
a right has a waiver, but they restricted to 30 dwelling units.
3 lots, and they had a
They had a big
creek
open
in the
space.
back,
Yep.
and
Yep. They put
didn't
that
really
big lot
have
in the
any. McPhee Manor was already platted out. There wasn't
Right.
a stub road or anything to connect to. So,
And the park was on the other side, so.
yeah.
So, Mark, what are we suggesting here if the lot size is greater than 1 acre? What's the remedy there? We're gonna.
Well, I
we're
mean,
gonna-
if it's
we're gonna
greater than
put a
1
yard-
acre,
Put a
then
road
we
through
could-
somebody's yard, or what?
Well, you still may not be able to do it. It just depends on, if there's enough acreage on an adjacent parcel.
Point that it's a
Or a little bit, puts a little bit more burden of proof on the developer to say,
Yeah.
hey,
Exactly right.
I've explored every way possible, and even though I've got lots next to me greater than an acre, I can't get any homeowners to cooperate and sell, so I think it just makes the litmus test just a little bit tougher. And because the connectivity is it's a big deal to me. That was something that I really felt like that we've just got lots of cul-de-sacs and not much really, and we're doing better on connectivity. There's no doubt about it. But I think that,
Well,
the idea is to make it a little clearer and take out some ambiguity in the existing language. And that's what we've done here in red.
Well, I'll say, to add on to your point, every time we talk, Grigsby Chapel people come in, reminded of the kind of growth we saw and didn't really have an opportunity to regroup before all those subdivisions came in, and they're all single access. There's, anywhere between 15 and 19 single access, depending upon how you count the neighborhoods, on Grigsby Chapel. And
That's part of the problem
Yeah.
of the traffic on Grigsby Chapel is there's no other way out.
Yeah, that's exactly
it's a
right.
shame.
Well, staff recommends approval of this resolution, PC-19-11.
Your language is perfect and concise and hits the nail on the head. So moved as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Are there any more utilities?
Not any other ones, no. That's it.
We talked about them all.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year,
Yep.
Planning Commission.
The,
Commissioners, audience, thank you for coming.
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.